In politics, what you see on the surface, that's often not the real story. Today, we're going to dive deep into a powerful analysis of Malaysian leadership that argues the real problem isn't about parties or personalities, it's about a fundamental clash between short-term appearances and real, long-term solutions. Let's get into it. Okay, so the analysis we're digging into today does not pull any punches. It kicks off with this incredibly blunt quote from the source material itself, saying, Indian politicians are the worst irresponsible, looting community opportunities and trapped in token gestures. It's a really provocative statement, for sure, and it's used to frame what the analysis sees as a total failure of leadership, especially within the Malaysian Indian community. So what is the real problem here? Well, this analysis argues it's not about which party you support. It's about two totally different ways of governing, what it calls optics versus systemic service. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you've got ceremonial optics. Think festival food packs, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, stuff that looks good for a photo but ultimately just keeps people dependent. Then, on the other side, you have systemic service. This is the hard, unglamorous work, securing legal land titles, setting up audited grants, building institutions that last. One creates dependency, the other creates genuine empowerment. Okay, that's the theory. But what does this actually look like on the ground? Well, the analysis says you can see it in the huge differences in outcomes for Malaysia's different communities. Let's take a look at how they stack up. And this really gets to the heart of it, right? You have to ask, if everyone's operating in the same political system, why is it that some communities seem to build lasting wealth and strong institutions while others just feel stuck? According to this analysis, the answer comes down to two things: unity and structure. Wow, okay, take a look at this table. It's pretty eye-opening. You see the Chinese community described as having high unity and strong institutions, which leads to collective empowerment. But then you look at the Indian community, and the analysis points to very low unity, with deep splits along caste and language lines and weak, fragmented institutions. And the result? Underfunded and divided outcomes. So what's the secret sauce here? According to this analysis, it boils down to one crucial thing: institutional safeguards. It argues that within the Chinese community, valuable assets like schools and temples are legally placed into protected trusts and associations. This structure is a game changer. It prevents any one person from misusing the funds and ensures that the wealth actually grows for the entire community. And here is the complete opposite. This is what happens when you don't have those safeguards. When community assets are tied to individual politicians, the whole system becomes incredibly vulnerable. The analysis claims this leads to funds being diverted, the real needs of the people being ignored, and a devastating cycle of institutional collapse. It keeps people dependent on the very leaders who are failing them. Now, it's easy to look at this and feel a bit hopeless, but here's the thing. This isn't a uniquely Malaysian problem. It's a pattern seen around the world. And the great news is, there are proven solutions out there. The analysis looks at what other countries have done to fix these exact same issues. Let's start with Singapore. What did they do? Well, instead of letting Tamil schools fend for themselves, they brought them into the national education system. That meant stable government support. Combine that with strong alumni networks, and you have a recipe for sustainable growth. The whole focus shifted away from petty politics and onto what actually matters, building education and career pathways. And then we've got South Africa. Think about this, post-apartheid. They didn't just give people political promises. They gave estate workers actual legal land rights. That's not a promise, that's real power. It's structural empowerment that replaced empty political talk and gave people a foundation to build on for themselves. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's actually super simple and incredibly powerful. Communities thrive when their assets, their schools, their temples, their land, are legally protected in things like trusts and cooperatives, when they're not tied to the whims of individual politicians. That is the bedrock of real empowerment. Okay, so armed with all this insight, the source material proposes something pretty radical. It's not about small fixes. It's talking about hitting a civilizational reset button to totally re-engineer what political leadership even means. And the core of this whole idea is something called the faculty of political transformation. Now, don't let the name intimidate you. Think of it like a new kind of leadership academy, one designed to completely change the DNA of a politician, shifting the focus from self-interest to public service, all based on ethics and proven global standards. So how would this thing actually work? Well, it's built on 4 key pillars. First, civilizational anchors, basically grounding leaders in timeless ethics from texts like the Thirukkural. Second, global benchmarking. Let's stop reinventing the wheel and copy what works in places like Singapore. Third, radical digital transparency. Think public grant tracking and complaint systems. And finally, and maybe most importantly, a relentless systemic focus. Fix the root cause. Don't just put a band-aid on the symptom.
All right, a big vision is great, but it's just a dream without a plan, right? So how do you actually get this done? The analysis lays out a really clear, step-by-step roadmap to make this happen.
Let's actually walk through the phases, because the order here is really smart. Phase 1, you set up the faculty as a neutral place for training. Then, in Phase 2, you bring in the leaders for intensive training. But check this out. Phase 3 is crucial. You roll out the digital tools for transparency before you launch the big community projects in Phase 4. That builds accountability right into the system. After that, you monitor, you evaluate, and then you scale up what works. It's a logical, practical plan.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. This isn't just theory. What does this plan actually achieve for people? Well, it means every single one of those 528 Tamil schools gets a permanent, legally protected land title. Done. It means temple funds get registered as trusts with audits made public. No more secrets. And it means displaced estate workers get real, tangible help with housing and business incubators. These are life-changing outcomes.
Which really brings us to the powerful conclusion of this whole analysis. The core message is simple and direct. The time for ceremonial optics is over. The game has changed. And what's so important to understand is that this change isn't just on the leaders. It's a two-way street. Yes, leaders absolutely have to shift from self-interest to real, systemic service, but communities have to change too. They have to go from being passive recipients of handouts to active citizens who demand transparency and hold their leaders accountable. So we're going to leave you with this final, incredibly direct message from the source material. It's a straight-up challenge to the old way of doing things, and it leaves no room for doubt. Message to irresponsible politicians. Your era of looting and token gestures is over. The demand for systemic service is now.